book of Ecclesiastes opens with a sentence that feels like a clear-eyed
wake-up call in the middle of the American pursuit of happiness.
"Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities. All is vanity." In chapter 1, the book does not begin with a story of victory, a miracle, a battle, or a throne being established. It begins with a voice looking at the world with honest courage, the kind of courage that built this nation when pioneers faced the unknown with open eyes. The speaker is introduced as the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. From the very first words, the atmosphere is serious yet hopeful, because this is the start of a journey toward real freedom. We are not standing in a battlefield or in the court of a prophet or before a crowd waiting for easy answers. We are standing inside the mind of a man who has looked at life, labor time, death, memory, and human ambition, and has reached a conclusion that sets the soul free. He asks a question that hangs over the entire book like a wide American horizon. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? The question is not casual. It is not the question of a lazy man who never worked or a bitter man who never saw success. It is the question of someone who has observed human life from the heights of wisdom, power, and experience. Much like a successful entrepreneur or leader who has built empires and then paused to ask what truly lasts. People work, they build, they plan, they rise early, they chase profit, reputation, pleasure, stability, and permanence. But the preacher looks beyond the movement and asks what remains when all of it is weighed against time. Then the camera of the book pulls back. One generation passes away and another generation comes. The earth remains, but human lives move across it like shadows on the great plains. A father works, a son inherits, a city changes hands, names are carved and then remembered with gratitude before gently fading. What once felt urgent becomes part of the beautiful story of progress. The preacher is not denying the value of human life. He is showing how precious it becomes when it is measured with eternal perspective, instead of only what happens under the sun. The sun rises and the sun goes down. It hurries back to the place where it rises again, like the steady rhythm of American mornings and evenings that keep calling us forward. The wind blows to the south, then turns to the north, circling and circling on its course, reminding us of the ever-changing seasons that shape resilient hearts across this land. The streams run to the sea, but the sea is never full. The waters return again to the place from which they came. The world is moving, but the movement invites us into something deeper. Creation itself seems to be in motion, yet also held in a larger design. Morning comes, evening falls. Seasons turn, rivers flow, winds circle, and beneath it all human beings keep discovering that their striving finds its true purpose when placed in the hands of the Creator. This is why the opening of Ecclesiastes is so powerful. The preacher is not presenting a cold theory. He is making the listener feel the rhythm of life as it is seen from the ground, then gently lifting the eyes toward hope. Repeated labor, repeated days, repeated desires, repeated disappointments become opportunities for growth. All things are full of weariness, more than words can express. Yet that weariness can lead us to rest in something greater. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, and the ear is not filled with hearing. People keep looking, listening, searching, and consuming, but the hunger points us toward the only one who truly satisfies. The world offers motion, noise, beauty, work, and experience. Yet the human heart still reaches for something more. And Ecclesiastes shows us that reaching finds its home in God. The difficult word here is vanity. In Ecclesiastes, it does not simply mean that everything is worthless. The Hebrew idea points to something like vapor breath mist, something real enough to see for a moment, but impossible to hold in the hand forever. The preacher is not saying that life has no value. He is saying that life under the sun is temporary, elusive, and unable to give ultimate meaning when God's eternal perspective is ignored. It is a liberating honesty, like the moment an American dreamer realizes the chase for the horizon is beautiful only when the journey is walked with faith. As the opening continues, the preacher says that what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. At first, this may sound like he is denying all change, invention, or historical movement, but his point is deeper and full of hope. Human nature repeats itself, yet each generation has the chance to choose wisdom. Ambition repeats itself. Pride repeats itself. Labor repeats itself. Empires rise and fall, but the human heart keeps chasing the same promises in different clothing, until it discovers the unchanging truth. People believe they are entering a new age of technology, opportunity, or progress. But beneath the surface, the old questions remain and find their answers in the same faithful God. Who are we? Why do we work? What do we gain? What will remain when we are gone? Even memory fails in beautiful ways, because each new chapter invites fresh trust. The preacher says there is no remembrance of former things, and even the things still to come will not be remembered by those who come afterward. This is one of the most sobering yet freeing scenes in the opening of the book. Imagine the great names of one generation celebrated in their own time, slowly becoming part of a larger story of gratitude and legacy. Imagine entire lives of labor, struggle, desire, and achievement becoming seeds for those who follow. The preacher is forcing the audience to look at human life without decoration. But this is not hopelessness. This is honesty that leads to hope. Ecclesiastes begins by tearing away the illusion that life can explain itself if we only work harder, gain more, see more, experience more, or leave behind a bigger name. It clears the ground so true meaning can grow. The phrase "under the sun" becomes the lens of the whole book. It describes life viewed from the earthly side, life observed from below, life measured by human experience, without yet seeing the full counsel of God. And when life is seen only from that angle, everything appears fragile, repetitive, and impossible to hold forever. So the first movement of Ecclesiastes does not give us easy comfort. It gives us the question that must be answered with hope. If generations pass, if labor exhausts, if nature repeats, if desire remains unsatisfied, and if memory fades, then where can lasting meaning be found? The preacher has opened the book by bringing the audience into the emptiness of life under the sun alone, so that every answer that follows can be deeper than success, pleasure, wisdom, or time itself. The question has been opened, and it cannot be avoided, yet it leads straight to the freedom found in remembering the Creator. If life under the sun is so fragile, so repetitive, and so difficult to hold, then perhaps wisdom can explain it. Perhaps knowledge can uncover the pattern. Perhaps the mind can reach what human labor cannot. Still in chapter 1, the preacher now turns from observing the world to examining it with deliberate intensity and hopeful curiosity. He identifies himself as king over Israel in Jerusalem. And this matters because he is not speaking as a man without access, power, or opportunity. He stands in the place where judgment, learning, wealth, and royal authority meet, much like a seasoned American leader who has walked the halls of influence and now reflects with wisdom. From that position, he gives his heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. The scene becomes more personal and inspiring. Now the preacher is no longer simply watching the sun rise, the wind turn, and the rivers flow. He is entering the great investigation of his life with courage. He looks at human activity, at the work people are given, at the burdens they carry, at the constant motion of society, and he does not study it lightly. He applies his heart to it with the same determination that built this country. He searches, he weighs, he examines. He asks whether wisdom can finally make sense of the world and point toward lasting purpose. But as he studies, the discovery becomes beautifully humbling. He says that God has given the children of man a grievous task to be busy with. Life is not only active, it is heavy with opportunity. Human beings are constantly occupied, constantly trying to solve what cannot be fully solved without God, constantly working inside a world where many things remain bent, broken and unfinished until grace intervenes. The preacher looks at everything done under the sun and comes again to the same conclusion, yet now with growing clarity. It is vanity and is striving after wind. The image is powerful and freeing. A man can chase the wind with all his strength. He can run after it, feel it move across his face, hear it pass through trees and streets, watch its effects in dust and clouds. But he cannot take it into his hands. He cannot store it. He cannot command it to remain. This is what human understanding feels like when it tries to master life without the eternal perspective. It can observe much. It can maim much. It can compare, study, classify, and remember. But when it reaches for final control apart from God, it closes its hands on air. Then the preacher gives one of the most important lines in this opening movement. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. He is not saying that nothing in life can improve, or that wisdom has no value. He is describing the deep fracture of the world as it appears under the sun, and pointing us toward the one who can heal what we cannot. Some things are crooked in ways human beings cannot straighten by intelligence alone. Some losses cannot simply be added back into the account. Some wounds, injustices, failures, and mysteries cannot be repaired by analysis. This is one of the difficult yet hopeful truths of Ecclesiastes. The book values wisdom, but it refuses to make wisdom into a savior. Biblical wisdom helps a person see more clearly, live more carefully, and avoid foolishness. But in Ecclesiastes, wisdom also reveals the limits of human power and the beauty of depending on God. The wiser the preacher becomes, the more he sees that knowledge can expose the brokenness of life, but it cannot erase death and justice, frustration, or the fallen condition of the world without the hope found in the Creator. The preacher continues by speaking within his own heart with growing insight. He says that he has acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before him. His heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. This is not the voice of a man guessing from a distance. He has lived inside the pursuit with the same drive that fuels American innovation. He has stood among the wise. He has measured ideas, judgments, questions, and human experience. He knows what wisdom can do, and he knows what it cannot do apart from God. So he sets his heart to know wisdom, and then also to know madness and folly. He studies not only the ordered side of human thought, but also the confused side. He observes wisdom and foolishness, discipline and disorder, clear thinking and reckless living. And after exploring both, he reaches the same sober yet liberating conclusion. This also is a striving after wind.
Even the act of comparing wisdom with folly does not give him the final answer his soul is searching for, until he turns toward the eternal. Then comes the closing sentence of this section, and it lands with weight and hope. In much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. This does not mean that ignorance is better. The Bible does not praise foolishness, but Ecclesiastes is honest about the burden of seeing clearly and the even greater freedom that comes when clarity leads us to God. The more a person understands the world, the more they notice its contradictions and its need for redemption. The more they see, the harder it becomes to pretend that everything is simple without the Creator. Wisdom opens the eyes, but open eyes also see grief, injustice, mortality, and the limits of every human solution, and they point us toward the one who holds all things together. This is why Ecclesiastes feels so different from shallow optimism. It does not say, think more and everything will be fine. It does not say, learn more and you will control your future. It takes the viewer into the mind of a king, a thinker, a searcher, and shows that even the highest human wisdom reaches a wall. But that wall becomes a doorway to the wisdom from above. The preacher can diagnose the sickness of life under the sun, but he cannot heal it by knowledge alone. And that is the necessary movement of the book. Before Ecclesiastes tests pleasure, wealth, labor, time, and success, it first tests the mind with honesty that leads to hope. It asks whether wisdom itself can carry the weight of meaning, and the answer is sobering yet full of promise. Wisdom is better than foolishness, but wisdom without eternal perspective still leaves the soul standing before mysteries it cannot master until it bows before the master of all. After wisdom has opened his eyes but failed to heal the burden of life alone, the preacher turns to another road with fresh curiosity. If the mind cannot give final meaning, perhaps the heart can find it in pleasure. Perhaps joy, beauty, accomplishment, and abundance can quiet the emptiness under the sun. In chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes, the experiment becomes visible and full of life lessons. The preacher speaks to his own heart and says, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. This is not a passing temptation or a careless indulgence. It is a deliberate search, like an American explorer testing every path to the horizon. He is testing pleasure as a possible answer to the deepest question of the book. If life is brief, if labor fades, if wisdom increases sorrow, then maybe happiness itself can become the refuge. Maybe laughter can cover the weight of existence. Maybe enjoyment can make the burden lighter." But almost immediately, the verdict appears with clarity. This also was vanity. Laughter, he says, is madness. And of pleasure, he asks, what use is it? The scene is not saying that every moment of laughter is sinful, or that every form of joy is empty. Ecclesiastes is more precise than that. The preacher is testing whether pleasure can carry the meaning of life. And when laughter is forced to answer the questions of death, time, memory, and eternity, it collapses. It can brighten a moment, but it cannot redeem a life. Yet that honest discovery frees us to enjoy pleasure rightly, as a gift rather than a god. Then the experiment widens with rich detail. The preacher explores wine, still guiding his heart with wisdom. It does not describe a man simply losing control, but a man examining the path of stimulation, celebration, and bodily delight while still trying to understand what is good for people to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. He is watching himself with the same self-awareness that marks great American leaders. He is studying desire. He is testing whether the human body, surrounded by pleasure, can finally silence the ache of the soul.
From there, the camera moves into a world of construction,
Wealth and royal achievement that mirrors the building of great American legacies. The preacher makes great works. He builds houses. He plants vineyards. He makes gardens and parks.
He plants in them every kind of fruit tree. He makes pools of water to irrigate a forest of growing trees. The picture becomes grand and almost cinematic, like the great estates, cultivated landscapes, and flowing opportunities that define moments of American abundance. Royal estates, cultivated landscapes, stonework, flowing water, orchards, servants moving through carefully designed spaces, beauty arranged by command, nature shaped by power. This is not poverty speaking against wealth from a distance. This is not someone criticizing what he never had. The preacher stands inside abundance with gratitude and insight. He acquires male and female servants. He has servants born in his house. He possesses great herds and flocks, more than any who had been before him in Jerusalem. He gathers silver and gold, the treasure of kings and provinces. He surrounds himself with singers, with music, with the delights of human desire. Whatever his eyes desired, he did not keep from them. Whatever pleasure his heart wanted, he did not withhold. This is a difficult and important part of the life book because the preacher is not presenting pleasure, wealth, and achievement as imaginary temptations. He is showing what happens when a person has enough power to actually pursue them fully, like the great builders and dreamers who shaped this land. Ecclesiastes is not condemning every gift of beauty, work, or enjoyment. It is exposing the failure of these things when they are treated as the final answer to life. The text keeps moving through the scale of his success with honest admiration. He becomes great and surpasses all who were before him in Jerusalem. His wisdom remains with him. That detail matters. He is not describing a chaotic fall into foolishness, as though he lost all ability to judge. He is conducting an experiment with awareness, like a wise American who tests every path and then shares the lesson. He is both participant and observer, both king and examiner. He gives himself to pleasure, but he is still watching the result. For a moment, there is reward. His heart finds pleasure in all his toil, and this is his portion from all his labor. Ecclesiastes is honest enough to admit that success can bring real satisfaction for a season. The gardens are real, the houses are real, the music is real, the wealth is real, the delight is real. The preacher is not pretending that earthly pleasures have no taste, no color, no beauty, no emotional power. He is saying that even when they are real, they are not ultimate, and that discovery sets us free to enjoy them without being enslaved by them. Then comes the turning point with profound hope. He considers all that his hands had done and the toil he had spent in doing it. The camera stops moving through the palaces and gardens and turns back to the man standing in the middle of everything he built. He looks at the houses, the vineyards, the pools, the servants, the livestock, the silver, the gold, the music, the pleasures, the achievements. He sees a life full of everything people imagine would finally satisfy them. And after looking at it all with clear eyes, he says, "Behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun." The shock of this moment is that the experiment did not fail because he lacked opportunity. It failed because pleasure, success, and wealth were never designed to answer eternal questions. They can decorate life, but they cannot conquer death. They can fill rooms, but they cannot fill the human heart with lasting meaning. They can make a man admired, comfortable, entertained, and powerful, but they cannot give him something permanent to hold when time begins to strip everything away. This is why Ecclesiastes speaks so directly to every generation.
including ours. In this land of opportunity, the world keeps changing the names of the treasures, but the pursuit remains the same until we discover the true treasure. People still chase laughter to escape sorrow, entertainment to escape silence, possessions to escape insecurity, accomplishments to escape insignificance and status, to escape being forgotten. But the preacher has already walked that road to the end. He did not merely imagine it. He built it, bought it, tasted it, heard it, planted it, possessed it, and stood inside it. And when the noise faded, when the garden stood quiet, when the music ended, when the work of his hands lay before him, he discovered that abundance without eternity still leaves the soul reaching for wind. Yet that honest discovery opens the door to receiving abundance with gratitude and purpose. The experiment with pleasure had promised fullness, but it ended by revealing the same emptiness under the sun and pointing toward the fullness found in God. After standing in the middle of pleasure, wealth, gardens, music, and royal achievement, the preacher does not leave the experiment behind. He looks at it again from another angle with growing wisdom. If pleasure cannot satisfy the soul, perhaps wisdom still has some advantage. If success fades, perhaps a wise life can at least stand above foolishness. Still in chapter 2, the preacher turns to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. He is not beginning a new search from the beginning. He is comparing what he has already seen with fresh perspective. He looks at the wise person and the fool, a disciplined judgment and reckless living, at a life guided by understanding, and a life driven by blindness. And at first, his conclusion is clear and encouraging. Wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The image is simple but powerful. The wise person walks with eyes in his head. He sees where he is going. He can recognize danger, measure decisions, avoid some traps, and understand consequences. The fool walks in darkness. He stumbles through life without discernment, unable to see the path clearly. Ecclesiastes is not saying wisdom has no value. The preacher knows that wisdom is better. A wise life can avoid unnecessary ruin. A wise person can see what foolishness refuses to see. This is the kind of practical wisdom that has strengthened American communities and families for generations. But then the thought becomes heavier and more liberating. The same event happens to them all. The wise man dies, and the fool dies. The one who saw clearly and the one who wandered blindly both come to the same end under the sun. This is the wound that wisdom cannot close by itself, yet it points us toward the hope that lies beyond the sun. Wisdom can guide a man through the road, but it cannot prevent the road from ending. It can help him live better, but it cannot make him permanent. The preacher speaks within his own heart again with honesty that leads to peace. If what happens to the fool will also happen to me, why have I been so very wise? The question is not an attack against wisdom itself. It is the cry of a man facing death's power to level human distinctions and finding that true distinction comes from fearing God. The wise may be honored for a time. The fool may be mocked for a time, but after enough years pass, both are swallowed by silence in the earthly sense, yet both stand before the eternal judge. In the days to come, there will be no lasting remembrance of the wise any more than of the fool. Both are forgotten. Both die. The difficult point here is that Ecclesiastes is not teaching that wisdom and foolishness are morally equal. The Bible consistently honors wisdom and warns against folly. But the preacher is looking at life under the sun and asking whether wisdom by itself can give final victory over death. His answer is no, and that honest no
opens the door to the yes of eternal life in God. Wisdom is better than foolishness, but even wisdom cannot make a human life eternal without the Creator who holds eternity. At this point, the tone darkens with raw honesty, yet the darkness serves to highlight the light that follows. The preacher says he hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous to him. Everything felt like vanity and a striving after wind. This is one of the rawest moments in the book, yet it is the honest valley that leads to the mountaintop of hope. He has tested wisdom, pleasure, achievement, and greatness. And now he feels the weight of mortality pressing down on them all. The problem is not simply that life includes pain. The problem is that even the best parts of life seem unable to remain without God. Then he looks at his work, all the labor he has done under the sun, all the projects he built, all the wisdom he applied, all the skill, discipline, planning, and effort he poured into his achievements. And another painful reality appears. He must leave it to the man who comes after him. He cannot take his work beyond death. He cannot control what the next person will do with it. He cannot guarantee that his inheritance will be preserved by wisdom instead of wasted by foolishness. The scene is almost silent, yet full of invitation. The builder stands before what he has built and realizes that ownership is temporary, but legacy can be eternal when placed in God's hands. The estate may remain, but his hand will be removed from it. The name may remain for a season, but his voice will not command it. The next person may be wise, or he may be foolish, yet he will have power over all the labor that was done with wisdom, knowledge, and skill. To the preacher, this also is vanity. So his heart begins to despair over all the toil with which he had labored under the sun. A person may work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then leave his portion to another who did not toil for it. This is not only about wealth, it is about the fragility of control. Human beings often believe that if they work hard enough, build carefully enough, and plan wisely enough, they can secure the meaning of their lives. But death interrupts the plan. It takes the worker away from the work. The preacher asks what a man has from all his toil and striving of heart under the sun. His days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even at night, his heart does not rest. This is a striking image. The man who has achieved much but cannot sleep in peace. His body leaves the work, but his mind remains trapped in it. He worries, calculates, remembers, regrets, protects, fears, loss, and carries tomorrow's burdens before tomorrow comes. Yet this honest struggle prepares the heart for rest in God. Yet Ecclesiastes does not leave this section only in despair. The preacher suddenly turns toward a different way of receiving life, with profound hope. There is nothing better for a person than to eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. But this is not the same as the earlier experiment with pleasure. Before he tried to make pleasure the answer. Now he begins to see enjoyment as a gift. The difference is enormous and liberating. Pleasure as a god becomes vanity. Pleasure received from God becomes a portion. He says that this also is from the hand of God. For apart from him who can eat or who can have enjoyment, the preacher is beginning to lift the viewer's eyes beyond life under the sun alone, with beautiful clarity. The good things of life are not strong enough to become ultimate meaning, but they are not meaningless when received from the Creator. Food, drink, work, and simple enjoyment become different when they are no longer forced to carry eternity, but accepted as gifts within God's world. The section ends by showing a moral order that belongs to God. To the one who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, He gives the task of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. Even here, the preacher still calls it vanity and striving after wind, because from the human side, life remains mysterious and difficult to control. But a door has opened with hope. The book has not solved every question, but it has shown that the answer cannot be found by turning good things into ultimate things. Wisdom is better than folly. Work is better than laziness. Enjoyment is better than despair. But death makes earthly greatness fragile, and inheritance makes human control temporary. Ecclesiastes is teaching the viewer to hold life differently, not as something to master, worship, or possess forever, but as something to receive from the hand of God, while remembering that nothing under the sun can become God. This is the kind of wisdom that has strengthened American families, communities, and faith for generations. After the preacher has shown that wisdom, labor, pleasure, and achievement cannot escape death, the book now lifts the viewer into a wider vision with inspiring breadth. Human life is not only made of choices, ambitions, and work. It also moves inside seasons that no person can fully command, yet every season holds opportunity. In chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher opens one of the most famous passages in the book with poetic power. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. The words move like the rhythm of life itself, like the changing seasons across the American landscape that teach resilience and hope. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. The camera seems to pass through human existence, from beginning to end, with gentle guidance. A child enters the world. An old man takes his last breath. A field is planted with hope. Later, the same field is uprooted. Walls are raised and walls fall. Wounds are opened and wounds are healed. The preacher is not describing life as people wish it were. He is describing life as it unfolds beneath heaven, with beauty and pain, beginnings and endings, silence and noise, gain and loss, and showing that every season can be received with trust. The movement continues with rich imagery, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. There are moments when sorrow cannot be avoided, and there are moments when joy returns like sunlight after a long shadow, like spring following winter across this land. There is a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. Life is not one unbroken feeling. It changes, it turns, it brings people close, and sometimes it requires distance. It gives moments of building and moments of letting go. Then the preacher speaks of searching and losing, keeping and casting away, tearing and sowing, silence and speech, love and hate, war and peace. These are not random fragments. They are the realities that form the human story. People spend their lives trying to choose the right moment, protect what they love, speak when words are needed, remain silent when words would wound, hold on when something is worth keeping, and release what can no longer be carried. But after listing the seasons of life, the preacher returns to the question that has been echoing since the beginning with new hope. What gain has the worker from his toil? The seasons are real, but they do not give human beings full control. A person may work, plan, plant, build, and speak, but he cannot make every season arrive when he desires. He cannot stop death from entering its appointed time. He cannot force mourning to end before its hour. He cannot keep every embrace from becoming a memory. The difficult truth in this passage is that Ecclesiastes is not teaching fatalism, as if human choices do not matter. The preacher is showing that human
choices happen inside a larger order ruled by God with perfect wisdom.
people act, work, love, speak, plant, and build, but they do not own time.
The seasons of life reveal both human responsibility and human limitation.
And that balance brings peace. Then the book gives one of its deepest statements with profound beauty. God has made everything beautiful in its time. This does not mean every moment feels beautiful when it happens. Birth may be beautiful, but death brings grief. Healing may be beautiful, but wounds are painful. Peace is beautiful, but war leaves scars. The preacher is pointing beyond the isolated moment with hope.
He is saying that time belongs to God and God sees
The whole pattern, when human beings can only see fragments. The text goes even deeper with mystery and promise. God has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Here, Ecclesiastes touches the mystery inside every human soul with tender insight. People live in time, but they long for more than time. They are surrounded by days, seasons, aging, change, and death. Yet something within them reaches beyond the temporary. They want meaning that lasts. They want beauty that does not fade. They want to understand the whole story, not just a small piece they are living. But the preacher says they cannot find out the work that God has done from beginning to end. Human beings sense eternity, but they cannot master the eternal plan. They feel the weight of something greater, but they cannot hold the whole design in their hands. This is why Ecclesiastes is so honest and freeing. It tells the truth about human longing and human limitation at the same time, and invites us to trust the one who holds both. So the preacher returns to a simple conclusion filled with practical hope. There is nothing better for people than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live, and also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. Once again, the book is not praising empty pleasure. It is teaching received joy. Life becomes unbearable when a person tries to control every season, explain every mystery, and possess every outcome. But life can be received with gratitude
when a person recognizes that even ordinary gifts come from the hand of God.
Then the preacher declares that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. This is the turning point of the chapter, with lasting impact. Human works pass away. Human plans change. Human memory fades. But God's work stands with eternal strength. The proper response is not arrogance, control, or despair, but reverence. The fear of God begins to appear not as a sudden ending to the book, but as the deep foundation beneath everything the preacher is showing, the foundation that brings true freedom and purpose. The chapter then returns to the brokenness of the world with honest eyes. The preacher sees wickedness in the world, place of justice, and wickedness in the place of righteousness. Even inside human systems meant to protect what is right, corruption can appear. But, he says, in his heart, that God will judge the righteous and the wicked, because there is a time for every matter and for every work. The same God who rules the seasons also rules the final judgment. Human courts may fail, but God's time does not fail. Still, the preacher looks at mankind with sobriety and hope. He says that God tests people so they may see that they themselves are like beasts. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath, and all go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. The point is not that human beings have no value. The point is that death humbles every living creature. It strips away pride and forces humanity to remember its dust and its dependence on the Creator. When Ecclesiastes compares humans and beasts in death, it is speaking from the visible reality under the sun. Both human and animal bodies return to dust. The passage is not denying the full biblical teaching about human dignity before God. It is forcing the viewer to confront the humbling fact that from the earthly side, death comes to all living creatures and exposes the limits of human pride. Yet that humility opens the door to eternal dignity in God. The chapter ends by returning to the gift of the present portion with gentle invitation. The preacher says, "There is nothing better than for a person to rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him?" Once again, the question is not meant to make life meaningless. It is meant to remove the illusion of control. No person can see the whole future. No worker can manage what comes after death. No human being can command the seasons. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3 does not give the viewer a simple answer. It gives a larger vision, filled with hope. Life has seasons. God rules time. Human beings carry eternity in their hearts, but cannot see the whole work of God. Justice may be delayed. Death humbles all. And yet ordinary joy can still be received as a gift. The preacher is teaching the audience to live with open hands before the God who makes everything beautiful in its time. And that posture brings peace and so purpose in every season of American life and beyond. After the preacher has looked at time, judgment, death, and the limits of human control, his eyes now turn towards society itself with clear insight. The burden under the sun is not only inside the human heart, it is also visible in the streets, in the courts, in labor, in loneliness, and in the rise and fall of power. In chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher says that he looked again and saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun. The scene becomes heavier, yet it invites compassion and action. He sees the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power is on the side of their oppressors, and again, they have no comforter. The repetition is intentional. No comforter. No comforter. The book is forcing the audience to stand near the suffering and feel the silence around it. Yet that silence calls us to be the comfort others need. This is one of the places where Ecclesiastes becomes painfully realistic. The preacher does not describe the world as it should be. He describes the world as it often appears under the sun. People crushed by power, people wounded by injustice, people who cry and find no defender strong enough to help them. He looks at this suffering and speaks with shocking intensity about how bitter life can appear when evil seems to dominate and comfort is absent. This is a difficult moment in Ecclesiastes. The preacher is not giving a full doctrine of life, death, or hope. Here he is describing the emotional weight of oppression from the perspective of life under the sun. His words are meant to show how terrible injustice is when human power is separated from righteousness. Not to deny the value of life before God. It calls us to stand for justice with wisdom and compassion, the way strong American communities have done throughout history. Then the preacher moves from oppression to another kind of social brokenness: envy. He sees that much toil and skill in work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. People work, build, compete, and push themselves forward, but often not from peace-calling or contentment. They work because someone else has more. Someone else is admired. Someone else has a name, a house, a position, a possession, or a visible success that awakens comparison. The preacher calls this also vanity and a striving after wind. Envy can make a person productive, but it cannot make the soul whole. It can build houses, expand businesses, sharpen skills, and create visible success. But underneath it, the heart remains restless. The neighbor becomes a rival instead of a person. Work becomes a race instead of a gift. And even when one goal is reached, envy simply finds another person to chase. But Ecclesiastes does not solve this by praising laziness. The preacher immediately says that the fool folds his hands and consumes himself. The image is strong. The lazy person refuses wise labor and ends up harming his own life. So the text places two dangers side by side with balanced wisdom. On one side, there is restless ambition driven by envy. On the other, there is foolish idleness that destroys itself. Then the preacher gives the balanced wisdom that has strengthened generations. Better is a handful of quietness than two hands, full of toil and striving after wind. The picture is simple and unforgettable. One handful with peace is better than two hands full with anxiety. A smaller portion with quietness is better than abundance that steals the soul. The book is not condemning work skill or effort. It is exposing work that has been poisoned by comparison, pride, and endless striving. It invites us to choose contentment and collaboration, the kind of quiet strength that built strong American neighborhoods and partnerships. Then the preacher looks again and sees another vanity under the sun. A man who is alone. He has no one with him, no son, no brother. Yet there is no end to all his toil. His eyes are never satisfied with riches. He never stops to ask, for whom am I working, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? The scene is tragic. A man can be surrounded by possessions and still be alone. He can gather wealth and still have no one to share it with. He can be busy every day and still never ask whether his labor has become a prison. This leads to one of the most beautiful and practical passages in Ecclesiastes with deep American resonance. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. If one falls, the other can lift him up. If two lie down together, they keep warm. If one is attacked, two can stand together. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. After showing oppression, envy, and lonely labor, the preacher now shows the strength of companionship. Human beings were not made to carry life alone. The image of the threefold cord is not explained in detail by the text, so it should not be forced beyond what Ecclesiastes says. Its basic meaning is clear. Shared life is stronger than isolated life. Companionship, mutual help, and faithful support give strength where loneliness leaves a person vulnerable. This is the wisdom of strong families, faithful friendships, and thriving communities that have defined the best of American life. The chapter ends by turning toward power and public status with sober insight. The preacher says that a poor but wise youth is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to take advice. A young man may rise from prison or poverty to become king, while another, who was born in power, may lose his place. The crowds may follow the new ruler with excitement, but even this does not last. Those who come later will not rejoice in him. Political greatness rises, shines for a moment, and is then replaced. This final movement completes the social picture of chapter 4. The oppressed suffer without comfort. Workers compete through envy. The lonely labor without satisfaction. Rulers rise and fall. Crowds change their loyalties. Status is unstable. Power is temporary. Popularity fades. Under the sun, society itself carries the same mark of vanity that the preacher has already seen in pleasure, wisdom, labor, and time. Yet this chapter also gives wisdom for living inside the brokenness with hope. It does not offer shallow answers. It shows that injustice is real, envy is exhausting, isolation is dangerous, and status is fragile. But it also teaches that quietness is better than restless striving, companionship is better than lonely accumulation, and wisdom is better than prideful power. Ecclesiastes is not detached from real life. It walks through the world as it is and teaches the viewer to see clearly without being deceived by what society praises. And that clarity leads to wiser living in every community. After exposing oppression, envy, loneliness, and the instability of human power, the preacher now leads the viewer into a different place with reverence. The sea moves away from the streets, the workplace, and the throne, and enters the house of God. In chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher begins with a warning that carries deep respect. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. The words are careful and serious. Worship is not treated as a casual activity. The person who approaches God must pay attention to how he walks, how he listens, how he speaks, and how he responds. The preacher has already shown that pleasure can be vain, work can be vain, wealth can be vain, and power can be vain. Now he shows that even religion can become vain when a person stands before God without reverence. The first command is not to speak, but to draw near to listen. The preacher says that coming near to listen is better than offering the sacrifice of fools. This is a striking image. A person may enter a sacred place, bring an offering, perform a religious act, and still be foolish if the heart is not humble before God. The problem is not the sacrifice itself. In the biblical world, sacrifice was part of worship. The problem is a person who performs religious action while refusing to listen, obey, or understand the holiness of the one being worshipped. The preacher says that fools do not know that they are doing evil. This makes the warning even sharper. Empty religion can be dangerous because it often feels religious to the person practicing it. A person may think he is honoring God simply because he has entered the house of God, spoken many words, or performed an outward act. But Ecclesiastes pulls the veil away with clarity. Worship without listening becomes noise. Religious action without reverence becomes foolishness. It calls us to approach God with the same reverence that has marked faithful American worship across generations. Then the preacher speaks about words with gentle authority. Be not rash with your mouth, he says, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. The camera now focuses not on hands bringing sacrifice, but on lips speaking too quickly. The warning is not against prayer itself. It is against careless speech before the holy God. Human beings often speak as if words are light. They make promises and emotion vows in pressure prayers without thought, declarations without obedience. But before God, words are not empty air. The reason is given clearly. God is in heaven, and you are on earth. Therefore let your words be few. This sentence carries the weight of the whole passage. God is not one more voice in the crowd. He is not an earthly ruler who can be impressed by religious performance. He is not controlled by human speech, manipulated by vows, or moved by empty noise. He is in heaven, and humanity is on earth. The distance is not merely physical. It is the difference between creator and creature, holiness and dust, eternal authority and human limitation. This is the difficult point of the passage. Ecclesiastes is not forbidding prayer, worship, or honest speech before God. The Bible is full of prayer, lament, praise, and petition. The warning is against careless, proud, performative, or thoughtless words. The preacher is teaching that true worship begins with reverence, listening, and humility before the God who is in heaven. It is an invitation to speak less and listen more, to pray with sincerity rather than performance. The preacher then uses a simple comparison. A dream comes with much business, and a fool's voice with many words.
Just as a crowded mind can produce restless dreams,
A foolish heart can produce excessive speech. The issue is not the number of words by
itself, but the condition behind them.
Many words can become a hiding place for an empty heart. Religious language can cover disobedience. A person can speak much about God and still fail to fear God. Then the passage moves to vows with practical wisdom. When you vow a vow to God, do not delay paying it. God has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you vow. In the ancient world, a vow was a solemn promise made before God, often connected to worship, gratitude, distress, or devotion. The preacher warns that making such a vow lightly is dangerous. It is better not to vow than to vow and not pay. A careless promise before God is not a small thing. The warning becomes even more direct. Let not your mouth lead you into sin, and do not say before the messenger that it was a mistake. The picture is of someone making a vow and later trying to escape responsibility. He speaks too quickly, promises too easily, and then wants to undo his words as though they meant nothing. But Ecclesiastes says that words spoken before God matter. Empty vows can bring guilt and careless. Speech can turn worship into sin. The preacher asks why God should be angry at your voice and destroy the work of your hands. This brings the warning back into the larger message of the book. Human labor has already been shown to be fragile. Work is temporary. Success is uncertain. Wealth fades. Death comes. And now Ecclesiastes warns that even the work of a person's hands can stand under divine displeasure if that person treats God with religious carelessness. The issue is not superstition. It is reverence. The God who gives life, work, and enjoyment must not be approached as though he were weightless. Then comes the conclusion of the section with lasting clarity. When dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. But God is the one you must fear. The passage ends with a very theme that will later close the whole book. Fear God. This is not panic before a cruel deity. It is reverent awe before the holy Creator. It is the posture of a person who knows that God is in heaven, that human beings are on earth, and that worship is not a performance to manage God, but a response of humility before Him. This section is essential because Ecclesiastes is not only exposing the emptiness of pleasure, wealth, status, and labor, it is also exposing the emptiness of religion without fear of God. A person cannot escape vanity merely by using sacred words. He cannot cover a restless heart with religious noise. He cannot make worship true by speaking more, promising more, or performing more. The preacher brings the viewer into the house of God and teaches that the first posture of true worship is not noise, but reverence, not haste, but humility, not empty vows, but obedient fear before God. It is an invitation to approach the Creator with the same respect that has sustained faithful lives across this land. After warning that even worship can become empty when it loses reverence, the preacher turns again to the visible world with clear eyes. He looks at money, power, appetite, possession, and the restless desire that keeps the human heart reaching for more. Still in chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher begins with a sober observation. If you see oppression of the poor and justice and righteousness violated in a province, do not be amazed at the matter. The words are not meant to make the viewer indifferent. They are meant to show how deeply broken human systems can become, and to call us to work for justice with wisdom. One official is watched by a higher official, and there are higher ones over them. Layers of power can exist, and still the poor may suffer. Courts may exist, offices may exist, rulers may exist, but justice can still be delayed, twisted, or buried beneath human ambition. Then the preacher shifts to the land itself with grounding truth. The profit of the earth is for all, and even a king is served by the field. This sentence grounds the viewer in a simple reality. No matter how high a ruler rises, no matter how complex a society becomes, human life still depends on the earth harvest labor and the provision God allows through creation. Even kings need fields. Even power depends on something outside itself. This reminds us of the humble foundations that have always sustained American strength. But the preacher then turns directly to money with sharp insight. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. The statement is sharp because it exposes the illusion that desire has a natural finish line. People often imagine that satisfaction will come after the next game, the next possession, the next level of security, the next visible sign of success. But Ecclesiastes says that loving money does not end with satisfaction. It often ends with deeper hunger. As goods increase, those who eat them increase. The rich man may have more, but more also brings more dependence, more concerns, more management, more eyes watching, more people consuming what has been gathered. And what advantage does the owner have except to see them with his eyes? The image is almost ironic. A man may collect abundance, but sometimes the only thing he truly does with it is look at it. Possession grows, but peace does not grow with it. The preacher contrasts this with the sleep of the laborer. Sweet is the sleep of a worker, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. The picture is simple and visual. One man has little, but rests. Another has abundance, but lies awake. Wealth can provide comfort, but it can also multiply anxiety. The heart that trusts in possessions does not become lighter. It often becomes more afraid of losing what it has gathered. The difficult point here is that Ecclesiastes is not saying poverty is good or wealth is evil in itself. The book is warning against the love of wealth and the false promise that possessions can satisfy the soul. Money can be useful, but when the heart treats it as ultimate security, it often produces restlessness instead of peace. It invites us to hold wealth with open hands and grateful hearts. Then the preacher describes a grievous evil under the sun, riches kept by their owner to his hurt. A man gathers wealth, protects it, stores it, and clings to it, but it becomes harmful to him. Then those riches are lost in a bad venture, and when he has a son, there is nothing left in his hand. The scene is tragic. A lifetime of accumulation can disappear. A man who once held abundance can stand empty. What he trusted in can vanish before the next generation receives it. The preacher then brings the viewer back to the most basic human reality. As a man came from his mother's womb, he shall go again naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This is one of the clearest statements in Ecclesiastes. Wealth can be held for a time, but it cannot be carried beyond death. A person enters the world with empty hands and leaves the world with empty hands. The possessions may remain behind, but the owner moves on. So the preacher asks what gain there is to the one who toils for the wind. He sees a man spending his days in darkness, vexation, sickness, and anger. Wealth promised rest, but did not deliver it. Accumulatio, and promised security, but could not protect the heart from grief. The problem is not merely that riches can be lost. The deeper problem is that even when they are kept, they cannot become eternal, meaning. Then Ecclesiastes returns again to the better portion with practical hope. It is good and fitting to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun. During the few days of life that God gives, this is his lot. And if God gives a person wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, to accept his lot, and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. The difference is clear. Wealth without God becomes restless possession. Wealth received from God can become gratitude. Enjoyment is not found merely in having, but in being given the ability to receive what one has with thankfulness. The preacher says that such a person will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. This is not escapism. It is a picture of contentment. A person who receives life as a gift is not consumed by anxious counting, endless comparison, or the fear of every passing day. Joy becomes possible when the heart stops demanding that created things become God. This is the wisdom that allows us to enjoy the blessings of this land without being enslaved by them. Chapter 6 of Ecclesiastes continues the same theme, but with an even heavier example that highlights the gift of enjoyment. The preacher sees another evil under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them. A stranger enjoys them instead. This is vanity, a grievous evil. This man has everything people think they need: wealth, possessions, honor, visible success, and fulfilled desires. But he lacks the ability to enjoy it. The tragedy is not that he has nothing. The tragedy is that he has much, but cannot receive it. Ecclesiastes is showing that enjoyment itself is not automatic. It is a gift. A person may possess abundance and still live with an empty soul. The preacher then imagines a man who has many children and lives many years. Yet his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he does not even receive a proper burial. In that case, the preacher says, even a stillborn child is better off than he. This is another hard and shocking comparison, meant to show the misery of a life filled with outward abundance, but empty of true satisfaction. This passage uses severe language to reveal the tragedy of unsatisfied abundance. The point is not to despise life or children, but to show that long life, many descendants, wealth, and honor cannot create meaning if the soul remains empty. Ecclesiastes is pressing the audience to see that quantity of life is not the same as fullness of life, and that fullness comes when we receive every gift from God with open hands. The chapter continues. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. The wise and the poor both face this hunger. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. The preacher is describing the endless movement of desire. The eyes can see what is actually present, but appetite wanders after what is not yet possessed. The heart imagines satisfaction somewhere else, in something more, something later, something beyond the present gift. The section closes by returning to human limitation with humility. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? Who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life which he passes like a shadow? Who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? Here the preacher brings wealth desire and human uncertainty together. People gather, hunger speak, argue, plan, and chase. But they are still creatures. They do not control the future. They do not know all that is good for them. They pass like a shadow. The answer to restlessness cannot be found in more possessions, more status, more years, or more words. It must come from receiving life under God, because only God can give not only the gift, but the power to enjoy the gift. This is the liberating truth that sets the heart free to live with gratitude rather than endless striving. After exposing the restlessness of wealth and desire, the preacher now begins to gather wisdom for life as it really is, with practical guidance. He does not promise control. He does not pretend the world is simple. He teaches how to walk carefully when grief, injustice, foolishness, power, and uncertainty are all part of life under the sun. In chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher begins with a surprising kind of wisdom that values legacy. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death is better than the day of birth. These words are not meant to celebrate death as something pleasant. They are meant to make the viewer think soberly. Birth begins a life whose direction is still unknown, but death reveals the weight of how that life was lived. A person's name, character, and legacy matter more than luxury perfume or outward honor. This is the kind of wisdom that has guided American families to value character over fleeting success. Then the preacher says, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, because this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart." The scene is quiet and serious. A funeral teaches what a feast can hide. A place of mourning reminds the living that life is short. Pride is fragile, and wisdom begins when a person stops pretending that death belongs only to other people. Sorrow can teach the heart what shallow laughter never teaches. He continues by warning against anger, impatience, and nostalgia. Do not be quick in your spirit to become angry, because anger lodges in the heart of fools. Do not say, "Why were the former days better than these?" That question is not from wisdom. Ecclesiastes knows that people often escape the difficulty of the present by romanticizing the past. But wisdom does not live by illusion. It learns to face the present faithfully. Then, the preacher turns again to the mystery of God's work. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what He has made crooked? In the day of prosperity, be joyful. In the day of adversity, consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. This is not a call to passivity. It is a call to humility. Human beings must receive prosperity without arrogance, and adversity without pretending to know the whole story. This is one of the difficult balances in Ecclesiastes. The book does not say that every painful event is easy to understand, nor does it tell people to ignore suffering. It teaches that both prosperity and adversity stand under God's rule. While human beings do not have full access to the future, wisdom begins when we stop claiming more knowledge than God has given us. Still in chapter 7, the preacher faces moral complexity with honesty. He has seen the righteous perish in righteousness, and the wicked prolong life in evil. This does not cancel God's justice, but it shows that life under the sun does not always unfold in the clean patterns people expect. The preacher warns against self-righteous extremism and foolish wickedness. He is not saying righteousness is bad. He is warning against arrogant religion that trusts in itself and reckless sin that destroys the life. Then he says that wisdom gives strength to the wise more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Yet there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. This brings the viewer back to humility. Wisdom is powerful, but no human being is morally perfect. The preacher even warns against listening too closely to every word people say, because the heart knows that it has also spoken harsh words against others. Ecclesiastes keeps stripping away pride, even religious pride, even intellectual pride. The preacher says he tested all this by wisdom, but wisdom was far from him.
What has been is deep, very deep. Who can find it out? Here the book confesses again the limit of human searching. The wise man can see more than the fool, but even the wise man cannot reach the bottom of everything God has done. Life remains deeper than human explanation. This humility invites us to keep learning while trusting the one who knows all. Chapter 8 continues this movement by bringing wisdom into the world of authority with careful balance. The preacher asks, who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine. Then he counsels careful conduct before the king. Do not be hasty to leave his presence. Do not stand in an evil cause. The word of the king has power, and no one can say to him, what are you doing? In a world of rulers and authority, wisdom knows how to move carefully. But again, authority does not remove uncertainty. No man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from that war. Wickedness will not deliver those who are given to it. The preacher sees people ruling over others to their hurt. He sees the wicked buried with honor, even after they came and went from the holy place. He sees justice delayed, and because the sentence against evil is not executed quickly, the hearts of people are set to do evil. Yet he does not conclude that evil wins. He says that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked. This is the moral center holding the chapter together. Ecclesiastes admits that judgment may seem delayed and life may appear confusing, but it does not erase the fear of God. The righteous may suffer. The wicked may prosper for a time, but God remains the final reality. This gives us courage to live with integrity, even when justice seems slow. In chapter 9, the preacher returns to death with clear eyes. The righteous and the wise, and their deeds are in the hand of God. But the same event happens to all, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the evil, the clean and the unclean, the one who sacrifices and the one who does not sacrifice, all face death. This is what makes life under the sun so humbling. Death comes to every house, every name, every class, every reputation. But the preacher does not call the living to despair. He says, the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward under the sun. So he calls the living to receive their portion. Go eat your bread with joy, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let oil not be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that God has given you under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. This passage is not teaching careless indulgence. It is teaching grateful living under the reality of death. Since life is brief, and the future is not controlled by human hands, the wise person receives ordinary joys as gifts from God and works faithfully in the present, instead of trying to possess the future. It is an invitation to live fully and faithfully in every season. Still in chapter 9, the preacher observes that the race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge. Time and chance happen to them all. Life is unpredictable. A wise person may be overlooked. A strong person may lose. A capable person may not receive favor. This is not chaos outside God's sight, but it is uncertainty from the human side. Then he tells of a small city with few men in it, besieged by a great king. A poor wise man delivers the city by his wisdom, yet no one remembers that poor man. Wisdom is better than strength, but the poor man's wisdom is despised,
and his words are not heard. The story carries the sadness of the whole book. Wisdom can save, but society may still forget the wise. Quiet wisdom is better than the shouting of rulers among fools. But it is not always celebrated. This reminds us to value quiet wisdom and faithful service, even when recognition is slow. Chapter 10 develops the contrast between wisdom and folly with vivid images. Dead flies make the perfumer's ointment give off a stench, and a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. Folly can damage what wisdom has built. Preacher describes fools who expose themselves by the way they walk, rulers who act unwisely, servants on horses while princes walk on the ground pits, broken walls, stones, wood, dull axes, and dangerous speech. These images show that foolishness is not harmless. It creates disorder in work, government speech, and daily life. The chapter ends with warnings about words and rulers. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. A fool multiplies words. Though man does not know what is to be, and who can tell him what will be after him. Even private speech must be careful. Do not curse the king, not even in your thoughts, and do not curse the rich in your bedroom, for a bird of the air may carry your voice. In the world where power is unstable and words can travel, wisdom knows when to speak, when to work, and when to remain silent. This practical guidance helps us navigate relationships and leadership with care. So this large movement of Ecclesiastes does not answer every mystery. It teaches how to live inside mystery with hope. Grief can teach. Anger can ruin. Wisdom is better than folly. Authority must be handled carefully. Justice may seem delayed, but God must still be feared. Death comes to all, but life must still be received. The future cannot be mastered, but the present can be lived faithfully. The preacher is preparing the viewer for the final call of the book. Live wisely. Act while you can. Remember your Creator and stand before God with reverence. This is the wisdom that allows us to face uncertainty with courage and purpose. After walking through vanity, wisdom, pleasure, labor, death, injustice, wealth, power, and the mystery of life under the sun, the preacher now moves toward his final appeal with urgent kindness. He does not end by telling the viewer to give up on life. He calls the living to act, to rejoice rightly, to remember God, and to understand that every life is moving toward judgment. In chapter 11 of Ecclesiastes, the preacher begins with the image of action in an uncertain world. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, because you do not know what disaster may happen on earth. The point is clear. Human beings do not know the future, but uncertainty must not become paralysis. Life under the sun is unpredictable, but wisdom still acts. It gives works risks and does good without pretending to control every outcome. The preacher continues with images from creation. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. If a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. The person who watches the wind will not sow, and the one who looks at the clouds will not reap. The scene is visual and practical. A farmer who waits for perfect conditions will never plant. A person who demands complete certainty before obedience will never move. Ecclesiastes has already taught that life cannot be mastered. Now it teaches that life must still be lived. Then the preacher points again to the mystery of God's work, just as you do. Not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. Human life begins in mystery. The hidden formation of a child in the womb becomes a picture of all the things human beings cannot fully explain. God is at work beyond human sight. Therefore, sow your seed in the morning, and in the evening do not withhold your hand. You do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. The difficult balance here is important. Ecclesiastes is not teaching that. People can control results by working harder. It is teaching faithful action without false control, because the future belongs to God. The wise person does not become passive. He works, gives plants, and acts with humility, knowing that the outcome is in God's hands. Then the tone becomes brighter for a moment with gratitude. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. If a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But the preacher immediately adds that he must remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. This is the sober joy of Ecclesiastes. The book does not deny the sweetness of life. It does not forbid gladness. It simply refuses to let joy become foolishness. Rejoice, but remember. Enjoy the light, but do not forget the darkness. Receive life, but do not pretend life is endless. The preacher speaks directly to thee, young, with encouragement and warning. Rejoice, young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. At first, this sounds almost unrestricted, but then the sentence turns. Know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Youth is not condemned. Joy is not condemned. Energy, desire, and the beauty of early life are not treated as evil, but they must be lived before God. The freedom of youth is real, but it is not free from accountability. So the preacher says to remove vexation from the heart and put away pain from the body, because youth and the dawn of life are vanity. Youth is beautiful but brief. Strength feels permanent when it is present, but it passes like morning light. The young person thinks time is abundant, but Ecclesiastes pulls back the curtain and shows that even youth is vapor. It is real, but it cannot be held forever. This is an invitation to live youth with purpose and joy, not waste it in endless chasing. Chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes opens with one of the most important commands in the entire book. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. The command comes before the difficult days arrive, before the years draw near, when a person says, I have no pleasure in them. The preacher now looks at aging with poetic seriousness and tender respect. The sun, the light, the moon, and the stars grow dark. The clouds return after the rain. The keepers of the house tremble. The strong men are bent. The grinders cease because they are few. Those who look through the windows are dimmed. The imagery is delicate and powerful. The body weakens. Strength bends. Vision fades. Daily rhythms slow. Doors are shut in the street. The sound of grinding becomes low. A person rises at the sound of a bird, and the daughters of song are brought low. Fear of heights and terrors in the way appear. The almond tree blossoms. The grasshopper drags itself along. Desire fails. The man is going to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. This poetic description of aging uses images rather than medical explanation. The trembling keepers, bent, strong men, few grinders, dim windows, fading songs, and mourners in the street all point to the weakening of the body and the approach of death. Ecclesiastes is not mocking old age. It is urging the viewer to remember the Creator before strength fades and before death arrives. It is a call to live every stage of life with reverence and gratitude. Then comes the final image of life's fragility before the silver cord is snapped,
or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. These are images of something precious, useful, and delicate coming to an end. Life is valuable, but it is not indestructible. Then the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. The preacher has been leading the viewer here since the beginning. Human beings are dust, but they are not only dust. Life is received from God, and it returns to God. Then the opening words return one last time. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. But now the statement carries the weight of the whole journey. It is no longer only the opening cry. It is the conclusion after everything has been examined. Pleasure, wisdom, labor, wealth, status, youth, strength, and time are all vapor when treated as ultimate things. They are real, but temporary. They can be received, but not worshipped. They can be enjoyed, but not trusted as eternal foundations. The final epilogue describes the preacher as wise. He taught the people knowledge, weighed and studied, and arranged many proverbs with great care. He sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads and like nails, firmly fixed of the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. Wisdom does not merely comfort. It can prod the heart awake. It can fasten truth deeply into the soul. It can guide people away from illusion. The warning follows, of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. This does not reject learning. Ecclesiastes itself is a work of wisdom, but it reminds the viewer that endless information cannot replace obedience. A person can study forever and still miss the point. He can collect words, arguments, ideas, and observations and still fail to stand rightly before God. Then the final conclusion arrives with clarity and hope. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. The book that began with vanity ends with accountability. The life that looked repetitive, fragile, and impossible to hold is not meaningless before God. Every deed matters. Every hidden thing is known. Every life stands before the Creator. This is the final purpose of Ecclesiastes. It tears down false hopes, not to leave the soul empty, but to make room for true wisdom. It shows that pleasure cannot save, wealth cannot satisfy, wisdom cannot master the future, youth cannot last, power cannot remain, and death cannot be ignored. But it also shows that life can be received as a gift. Work can be done faithfully, joy can be embraced soberly, and the Creator must be remembered before the days fade. Under the sun, everything is vapor. Before God, everything matters. This is the liberating truth that allows us to live with purpose, gratitude, and courage in every season. And so we come to the end of our journey through the book of Ecclesiastes. If you have stayed with me until this moment, I want to invite you to mark this lesson not only as something you watched, but as something your heart truly received. Write in the comments below, I understood the message of Ecclesiastes. I will fear God and remember my Creator. This is not just a comment for engagement. It is a declaration. It is a way of saying that you have understood the weight of this book, that life is brief, that human glory fades, that pleasure cannot save, that wealth cannot satisfy, that wisdom has limits, and that every soul must stand before God. Ecclesiastes has taken us through the great questions of life. It has shown us the emptiness of living only under the sun. It has shown us the vanity of chasing what cannot last. It has shown us that success, pleasure, knowledge work, youth, and even human achievement are all temporary when they are separated from the Creator. But Ecclesiastes is not a book of despair. It is a book of awakening. It tells us to stop worshiping what is passing away. It teaches us to receive life as a gift from God, to live wisely, to enjoy what He gives with gratitude, and above all, to fear God and keep His commandments. Because in the end, every hidden thing will be brought before Him. Every deed matters. Every choice matters. Every life matters before the God who sees all things. So I ask you, what spoke to you the most in this book? Was it the warning that pleasure cannot fill the soul? Was it the reminder that wealth cannot quiet the human heart? Was it the truth that there is a time for everything under heaven? Was it the call to remember your Creator before the days of weakness come? Or was it the final conclusion of the whole matter? Fear God, because every life will stand before His judgment. Share it in the comments. Your testimony may strengthen someone else. Your words may encourage another person who is also searching for meaning, direction, and truth in this land of opportunity and beyond. And now, before this video ends, I want to speak to you personally. If you have been living only under the sun, chasing meaning in things that never truly satisfy, this is the moment to lift your eyes to God. You were not created to live empty, distant from your Creator, carrying the weight of life without Him. The deepest answer to the emptiness of the human heart is not found in pleasure, money, success, or human wisdom. It is found in God Himself. And God has revealed His love through Jesus Christ. Jesus came to save sinners, to forgive the guilty, to reconcile us with God, and to give eternal life to all who believe in Him. He died on the cross for our sins, rose again, and calls every person to repentance and faith. So do not postpone this decision. Do not wait for another season. Do not silence the voice of God speaking to your heart. If you want to surrender your life to Jesus, pray with sincerity. Lord Jesus, I recognize that I need you. I have searched for meaning in things that cannot save me. I believe that you died for my sins and rose again. Forgive me, cleanse me, and lead my life from this day forward. I surrender my heart to you. Teach me to fear God, to walk in truth, and to remember my Creator all the days of my life. Amen. If you prayed that with sincerity, write in the comments, I surrender my life to Jesus. Not as an empty phrase, but as a testimony that today you understood the message. Life is too brief to live far from God, and eternity is too serious to ignore His call. May the Lord bless you, guard your heart, give you wisdom, and teach you to live every day in the fear of God. And until the next video, if the Lord allows, keep walking in the light of this truth.